Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel. Today we will be listening to the 11th part of What If Deku Had a Game Inventory Quirk. If you enjoy, please consider liking, commenting, and subscribing down below, and don't forget to hit that bell icon so you get notified when videos go live. Now, without further ado, let's get into the video. Chapter 41. Izuku's eyes shot open and he bolted upright, gasping for air. Someone next to him laid a hand on his chest and gently pressed him back down. Easy, nerd. Feeling any better? As his senses caught up with him, Izuku noticed that he was sitting in a hospital room. Katsuki was sitting in a chair by his bedside, and Izuku-sensei was leaning in the doorframe. Izuku laid a hand over his heart, feeling his pulse settle back down. He reached down and fingered the hem of the hospital gown he was wearing. What day is it? Izuku-sensei huffed. The raid on the Shihasaikai was 2 days ago. You gave a lot of us quite a scare, problem child. Katsuki huffed. That's an understatement. A bunch of us were thinking this was gonna be another Momo situation. Izuku's eyes widened, and he bolted upright again. Togata-senpai? How's Togata-senpai doing? Katsuki gently pushed him back down again. Izuku-sensei huffed warmly. Because of course the first thing you're worried about is someone else's safety, problem child. Don't worry, Togata's looking to make a complete recovery within the week. He's already awake and aware, but the doctors are insisting that he stay here for a couple more days. Recovery girl's been giving him regular healing sessions. But more importantly, how are you doing? Izuku frowned and ran a hand over his chest. I feel fine. It doesn't seem like there's anything wrong. But I'm still confused about what happened at the end, there. Katsuki huffed. You haven't figured it out yet, nerd. You had a quirk evolution. The whole 6-armed Vajrayasura transformation thing should have made it pretty obvious. Izuku blinked, then stared down at his hand. I accessed a video game character's powers. Used one of their transformations. But I thought I could only equip items and weapons. Katsuki grunted and crossed his arms. Again. Quirk evolution. Near as I can figure, your body had gotten seriously messed up from the spikes in your arms and legs, which is probably what triggered it. Granted, you needed Jiro to give you an opening to actually use that evolution, but the point carries. Izuku hummed in understanding, still staring down at his hand. So, what now? Once I'm discharged, do we start testing my new limits? There was a knock on the wall outside, and Izuku-sensei moved to reveal a familiar face standing in the doorway. My Wakaru Mimoto grinned at him. Good to see you're doing well, Midoriya-kun. Though, I'm a little annoyed that you proved me wrong with that little stunt of yours. I have a reputation for being spot on with my analysis. Izuku's eyes widened. My Wakaru-san. Did they call you in because of my quirk evolution? She shook her head slightly. It was actually because of the girl that you rescued from that Yakuza base. She won't give any details about her quirk other than that it's a curse, and Chisaki wasn't any help, either. That was when Shouta cashed in a favor with me. Izuku sat upright. Oh. Is Eri doing alright? Katsuki huffed. As far as I know, she's perfectly healthy, but the docs want to keep her here until they know the details on her quirk. Izuku hummed. Well, that's good. Wait, where's Kika? Katsuki smirked. Mike had to drag her back to UA so she wouldn't be hanging over you while the docs were trying to examine you. I had to convince her that I'd be here the whole time before she allowed Mike to take her out of the room. He held up his phone, open to a text conversation with her. I shot her a text a few seconds ago. Suddenly, Izuku's phone exploded with notifications, buzzing so hard that it shook itself off the nightstand. Izuku's arm shot out and caught it before it could hit the floor, and he immediately started trying to manage the incessant flow of texts. After a few seconds, his phone rang, and he accepted the call from present Mike. Hey, Mike-sensei. Yeah, I'm doing alright so far. How's everyone else? Present Mike chuckled. See for yourself. The call switched to FaceTime, and Izuku grinned as he saw the class waving back at him. The camera angle was clearly from the top of the chalkboard, and Izuku could only guess that the feed from his phone's camera was being displayed on said board. He waved, and the class cheered, Kika jumping up on top of her desk and screeching triumphantly. Yeah, I love you guys, too. Hopefully, I'll be back soon, so don't wreck the school while I'm gone, yeah. The class cheered again, and Izuku couldn't help but grin wider. Present Mike stuck his head in the shot and said, please get back soon. They've been going crazy waiting for news about you. Do you realize what I've had to put up with for the past 2 days? Izawa-sensei stuck his head next to Izuku's and stared through the phone at his husband. Now you know what I have to deal with on a regular basis. Suffer. The class started laughing, and Kaka bounded up to the front of the room. Izuku, you'd better get your ass back here, or I'm going to storm that hospital and drag you home myself. Izuku laughed. Yeah, see you in a bit. He hung up and breathed a deep sigh of relief. Good. They're all okay. He set the phone down on his chest and glanced over at Katsuki. You had to deal with that Katsukame guy, right? How are you doing? Katsuki huffed. The guy didn't even land a punch. The only damage I took was him draining my stamina when he was boosted. Yurika and I both recovered pretty quickly. Only reason I'm here is to make Jiro feel better about someone keeping an eye on you. Izuku nodded. Good. What about the others? Are Amajiki-senpai, Kirishima, and Fat Gum okay? Katsuki winced. They're up, but they're not gonna be doing a lot of hero stuff for a while. Tsunader got kinda banged up fighting the trash trio, and he pushed his quirk a lot. He's still recovering from the quirk exhaustion. Fat Gum is intact, but he burned up a lot of his fat fighting a couple of the 8 bullets. He's gonna need a few days off to build that layer up again. And Riot? Well, to put it bluntly, he's a mummy. But he's alive, so that's good. Izuku sighed with relief, then grinned. So, what I'm hearing is that the raid suffered 0 casualties. Katsuki grinned back. No casualties, every Yakuza member got arrested, and you got a badass power-up. All in all, not a bad raid. Toshinori knocked on the doorframe of the hospital room, smiling softly as Mirai glanced up from the clipboard in his hands. You know, I would have expected the doctors to insist that you refrain from paperwork until after they've released you. I'm certain that Shozenji-san would. Mirai huffed. Since my injuries were minimal, it was decided that looking over paperwork submitted by my sidekicks would not be too much of a strain on my eyes. Also, Recovery Girl hasn't checked on me, she's been too busy with Mirio and the Kirishima boy. Toshinori shrugged and walked in, closing the door behind him before sitting down in one of the chairs. He gently took the clipboard from Mirai's hands and turned it around, humming as he scanned the papers. So, I heard that there were instances of doppelgangers during the raid. Mirai nodded. Indeed. Midoriya encountered a clone of Eraserhead, and I encountered a double of Rappakendu who, based on Fat Gum's report, was much weaker than the original. Toshinori frowned. According to these reports, the clones melted into a brown, mud-like substance. That sounds very similar to the substance produced by the villain Twice, who I believe was arrested at Kamino. Mirai huffed. If you're insinuating that he escaped and fell in with the Shihasaikai, don't. Bubble Girl contacted Kitsubutsu yesterday, and Bubaigawarajin has not left the premises since he arrived, nor have his quirk-suppressing cuffs been removed. Which means that we dealt with a similar quirk, not his. My agency is already in contact with Tsukashi's department, and Centipeter is currently going through the arrest records for the raid. Toshinori sighed with relief. Good. Mirai reached out and laid a hand on Toshinori's shoulder, taking the clipboard in the same motion. We have this covered. More importantly, the public's been demanding to know where you are. You need to figure out how to tell them that you're retiring. Toshinori sighed and stared down at his clasped hands in his lap. I'm not sure what to tell them. I never realized that I would have to prepare for this eventually. Ideally, I would have started preparing to retire after I passed on One for All, but circumstances have forced this on you much earlier than you anticipated, Mirai finished. Toshinori nodded. I don't know what to say. How am I supposed to reassure Japan that society won't fall to pieces just because I'm not there? How am I supposed to promise a future that I won't be there to ensure? Mirai patted him on the shoulder. My advice would be to ask Netsu. Knowing the rat, he's probably had plans in place for years in preparation for this very thing. Toshinori shuddered. Most likely. But that's if I can bring myself to approach anyone for help in the first place. He twirled his fingers. I'm scared, Mirai. My whole career, I've tried to distance myself from everyone so that they wouldn't suffer at all for one's hands. I'd seen personally what that man would do to his enemies' loved ones, and I couldn't bring that on anyone. Working relationships were the most I dared to allow myself. And now, even after that monster is dead, I still can't bring myself to be close to anyone. I feel like I'll retire and die alone, with no one there for me during my final days. And that terrifies me, Mirai. The younger hero said nothing, silently staring out the window of the hospital room. After a few tense seconds, Mirai sighed and looked Toshinori in the eyes. I don't know what to say. I don't know what I need to do to help you with this. And that terrifies me, too. For as long as I've worked with you, I've been your support. Your first sidekick. The brains to your brawn. I would come up with a plan of action for you to follow. And to not know what direction to guide you. It's not a feeling that I'm proud to admit. The best I can do is point you in a general direction and pray that you can find your own course. Toshinori smiled softly. Thank you, old friend. You've always been my guiding compass. Please, show me my true north one last time. Izuku tapped his knuckles against the doorframe of the hospital room, smiling as Eri's head shot up to meet his eyes. Hey. You didn't think I'd save you and leave, did you? Her face twitched, as though she was trying to smile but couldn't remember how. The men in white coats said you hurt yourself really badly. I'm sorry. Izuku immediately strode forward and knelt by her bedside, lifting her chin with a gentle hand. Hey. None of that. You don't need to apologize when you haven't done anything wrong. But you got hurt because of me. Izuku chuckled warmly. No. I got hurt because I chose to push myself. You didn't do anything to hurt me. If you want to blame someone, blame Chisaki. He's the only one who was doing bad things. And he has a lot that he needs to apologize for. But you don't need to say sorry for anything. Okay. If someone gets hurt trying to help you, it's not your fault. It's the fault of whoever that person was saving you from. Eri sniffled and lightly touched his hand. Okay. Izuku nodded with a smile. Now, I can tell you don't like being here. It's too much like the compound, isn't it? She nodded fearfully. All the white walls and needles. I don't like it. It makes me think of him. Izuku hummed. Well, we can't have a nice young lady like you being uncomfortable. I can bring you somewhere else, but you've gotta do a little thing for me before we can do that. Are you okay with that? She shrank away from his touch. Are you gonna make me go away like Mr. Chisaki always did? Izuku's blood ran cold. Is she implying that Overhaul would use his quirk on her? Oh, he's lucky he's being sent to Tartarus, otherwise I would punt his ass halfway across the country. Outwardly, he held his hands up in a peaceful gesture. No. Nobody's gonna make you go away like that. She whimpered, but scooted closer to him. What do you want me to do? Izuku smiled encouragingly and cupped her chin with his hand, internally wincing when she flinched at the contact. All I need you to do is sit still for a bit and let a nice lady touch you for a few seconds. Can you do that for me? She flinched again. I can't touch people. I make them disappear. It's my curse. Izuku frowned. Well, if you'd like, we can have the man in the black costume come in. See, he can turn other people's quirks off with his own quirk. So if your quirk acts up, he can stop it before it hurts the lady. Okay. Her head whipped up to meet his eyes. Please. I don't want to make anyone disappear. Izuku nodded and glanced back at the nurse standing in the doorway. Go get Eraserhead and my Wakeru-san. They should be together. Izuku bounced Eri on his hip as they walked out of the hospital together. She clung to his shirt fearfully and glanced up at him. Where are we going? He smiled softly down at her. Well, we're gonna go to my school. It's not like the hospital at all. There's plenty of colors, and there's no needles. And the people are super nice, too. She hummed and clutched at his shirt tighter. Why are we going there? Izuku hummed. Well, now that you're not with Chisaki and his people, we've gotta find somewhere for you to be, right? And the person who runs the school is really smart, so I'm sure he can find a good place for you really quickly. But he's got a lot of stuff to do, which is why he couldn't come to us at the hospital. We've gotta go to him. He stopped in front of Aizawa-sensei's car, parked by the curb. "Now, have you been in a car before?" She shook her head. "Mr. Chisaki never took me far from the, compound. We always walked places, and it hurt my feet." Izuku smiled. "That's okay. You don't need to do any walking this time. No need to worry, I'll be right next to you the entire time, okay? And the man who can turn off quirks is going to be there, too." She relaxed at that, and he hummed warmly, before stepping forward and using his free hand to open the back door. Settled in the back row was a standard booster seat, already hooked up to the seat belt. Izuku set Eri down and quickly fastened her seat belt, before hustling around to the other side of the car and slotting himself in next to her. Aizawa-sensei climbed in the front passenger seat, immediately glancing back and checking to make sure Eri was secure. "Good. Let's get out of here. I hate hospitals." Present Mike chuckled as he slid into the driver's seat. Yeah, I know. Watch your language, Sho, we've got a little kid in the car this time." Aizawa-sensei huffed warmly as the engine whirred to life. Eri glanced around fearfully, only to relax slightly when Izuku laid a hand on her leg. "Easy. It won't be noisy for long. Just sit back and enjoy the ride, okay?" 1 week later. Aizawa-sensei walked into the classroom right as the bell rang, and the class went through a variety of reactions to the sight of Eri balanced on his hip. A quick flash of erasure silenced all of them. "This is Eri. Those of you with work studies will recognize her. For the rest of you, all you need to know is that she was recently rescued from a precarious situation. Be careful around her, she may have triggers that we haven't discovered yet." A thought seemed to strike him, and he glanced at Fumikage. "Tokoyami, maybe keep your distance for a little bit." Her previous caretakers wore plague doctor masks. Fumikage winced and nodded. "Understood, sensei." Aizawa-sensei nodded and turned his attention back to the class as a whole. "Due to her situation, Eri has been placed under my care. Out of nowhere, erasure activated. If I hear about anyone treating her poorly, they're gone. Immediately. No questions asked." "Understood." The class chorused their understanding. Internally, Izuku chuckled. "And the man says he doesn't like kids." Aizawa-sensei nodded and let his quirk turn off. He carefully set Eri down on the edge of the table next to the podium, before turning his attention back to the class. "Now, another thing to be aware of, the school festival is approaching quickly. Every class needs to decide on something to do for the festival as a class. Therefore, I suggest you decide on something soon, or else I'm making you attend a public lecture. On stage. Get the picture?" The class shuddered and nodded. "Good." He glanced up at the clock and sighed. "Right. I need to take Eri to recovery girl, so for now, you're dismissed until classes start." He walked out the door, and immediately, everyone started throwing out ideas. Izuku quickly walked to the front and let out a piercing whistle, drawing everyone's attention. "All right, people, listen up. We're not going to get anywhere by just shouting ideas at each other, so let's give this a semblance of organization." He reached under the podium and pulled out a stack of whiteboards and markers. "Katsuki and I will hand these out. Write down one idea you have for the school festival. Once everyone's done, we'll collect them, put the ideas on the board, and vote on each one. Got it?" A chorus of assent rose up. "Good." A few minutes later, the results had been collected, and the list of ideas was written on the board. Before the voting even started, Izuku raised his hand to hold their attention. "Now, keep in mind that this isn't just for us. The whole school will be attending the festival, so we have to do something that everyone will enjoy. Keep that in mind when suggesting." When the voting concluded, Izuku had his head in his hands and his elbows on the podium. "All right, we're getting nowhere with this. We need to start with a broad idea and narrow it down into something specific." Hitachi raised his hand. "If I could make a point? A lot of the other classes are holding grudges against us for stealing the spotlight. Not like we want the attention, but there's not much we can do about that now. As things stand, tensions with our class are high. Why don't we try doing something that brings the tension down?" Izuku snapped his fingers and pointed at Hitachi. "Good point. What we need to do is give the other classes an opportunity to let their stress out in a safe, non-destructive way. Something to help them relax. Kaminari raised his hand. I don't know about you guys, but music always helps me to relax. Maybe we could do a musical performance. Ashido frowned. Not everyone likes just listening. Some people prefer to get up and move around. Personally, I keep up my freestyle dancing as a hobby and stress reliever. Sato hummed. Also, if people are going to be active, then they're going to need refreshments once they get tired. Not to mention, there are some people who tend to eat their stress away. Izuku slammed a fist into his palm. Music, dancing, and food. We'll set up a nightclub in one of the auditoriums. A chorus of assent rose up, only to pause when Itza stuck his hand up. This seems like a good idea, but if we just put on music taken from the internet, it might make us appear lazy. Izuku grinned. Then we put together a band. His eyes snapped to Kyuka. And I know somebody who's a great musician. All eyes turned to her, and she blushed and rubbed at her arm. Yeah, I like singing. And playing music. But I've never performed in front of a live audience before, save for my parents. Izuku grinned wider. Nobody said you'd be alone. How big of a band do you want? Kyuka frowned and tapped her chin. I'm thinking of 2 guitars, a keyboard player, and a drummer. I can definitely take one of the guitars, so that just leaves 3 more positions. Izuku nodded. I can take the other guitar, and Katsuki can handle percussion. He scanned the class. Does anybody here have experience with piano and / or keyboard? Nobody spoke up, and Izuku frowned. That might make things difficult. Suddenly, a thought occurred to him. Wait a sec. If Aizawa-sensei agrees, I might have someone who can fill that position. But it's a big if. Chapter 42. Izuku tuned his guitar as he listened to the other classes file into the auditorium above. I'm surprised Aizawa-sensei agreed to this. Katsuki grunted as he fiddled with his drumsticks. I'm more surprised that she agreed to this. Aunt Mitsuki cuffed him over the back of the head lightly. Hey, I've been waiting for an opportunity to play again for years, brat. If I'd known Izuku's girlfriend had parents who owned a music center, I would have been over there in a heartbeat. Kyuka giggled as she tuned her own guitar. Honestly, I'm surprised Mom Midoriya hasn't dragged you over to the music center yet. Then again, it's been a while since Izuku and I had a chance to come over, so I dunno. Aunt Mitsuki grinned. Man, it's been ages since I performed in one of UA's auditoriums. Heck, I think Inko and I pulled this kinda thing for one of our own school festivals. We didn't get much turnout, though, being in Gen Ed. Guess I'll see if my skills are rusty after all these years. The lights above dimmed, and Izuku grinned. Showtime. Shouta grinned as smoke hissed out over the stage, and several multicolored lights shone through as the band rose up over the crowd. Jiro was front and center at the microphone, with Midoriya next to her on backup guitar, Bakugo on percussion, and the blonde's mother on guitar. He'd been surprised when Midoriya had asked if students' relatives could assist with school festival events, and he was glad he'd allowed it once the class rep had explained their plan. And honestly, a nightclub in one of the auditoriums wasn't one of the worst ideas he'd seen during his teaching career at UA. Seriously, Vlad? A whole ass play? He bounced Eri on his hip, her eyes sparkling as she made out the students on stage. What are those things they're holding? He glanced over at her. Those are instruments. They're gonna play some music for everyone to dance to. If it gets too loud, just let me know, alright? She frowned. What's music? His heart broke a tiny bit, and he had to forcibly remind himself that Chisaki Kai was already in Tartarus as a quadruple amputee. Music is when you have a lot of different sounds, one after the other, in a specific pattern. You don't have to do anything, just sit back and listen. She hummed. Oh. I don't think Mr. Chisaki would have liked music. The rooms were always so quiet. I didn't like it. Shouta smiled softly. Alright. Once we're done here, I can get you a small speaker so that your room doesn't have to be quiet, okay? She nodded and leaned into him. Okay. Jiro tapped at something on her collar, and her voice echoed throughout the auditorium. Evening, ladies and gentlemen of UA. Things have been getting pretty hectic lately, so we're giving everyone a chance to party it up and unwind a bit. We also have food and drinks available at the counter by the doors, provided by our very own baker's dozen. And if you're feeling a little out of shape, not to worry. Anima has multiple helpers standing by on delivery duty. Now, enough talking. Let's get this party started. She struck a chord on her guitar, and Eri brightened. That sounds nice. Is there going to be more of that? Shouta grinned. A lot more. Naoto paused as he registered the sounds coming from one of the auditoriums. Frowning, he turned to Tetsu and set his props in the other boy's hands. I'll be along shortly. Just need to find out what's going on over there. The metallic teen grunted with exertion. Fine, bro. Just don't take too long. These things are super heavy. Naoto chuckled. Just think of it as off-hours strength training. Tetsu laughed and started marching off towards the auditorium that 1B had reserved for their play. Naoto turned on his heel and walked over to the noisy room, cracking one of the doors open and poking his head inside. He was immediately struck by a cacophony of cheers, backlit by the admittedly impressive music coming from the stage. He saw several students from different courses and years dancing their hearts out on the multicolored dance floor, as 3 WANA students and a blonde woman led the tempo with their performance. He noticed that the French kid was acting as an impromptu disco ball, and the Satu boy was serving various pastries to anyone who stopped by the counter. He ducked as a hawk flew overhead, carrying a basket of drinks over to a table in the corner where a couple of upperclassmen were talking and laughing. Naoto cautiously stepped inside, closing the door behind him. In a daze, he made his way over to the counter. What's on the menu? Satu glanced over at him. Depends. What are you in the mood for? Naoto frowned. After a few seconds of consideration, he said, Do you have anything with crow? Satu chuckled. No, but I think I might be able to find a slice of humble pie back here. Though, I heard through the grapevine that you're into French cuisine. I can whip up a quick crepe for you, if you want. Got any filling preferences? Naoto hummed. Strawberries, if you can manage it. Satu grinned. Sure thing. 1 strawberry crepe, coming right up. As the other boy headed towards the small kitchen set up in the back, Naoto glanced around the room, taking in the general positive atmosphere. He noticed how none of the spotlights were focused on the stage, but were instead shining on the dance floor, which was dominated by the other courses. He registered footsteps approaching, and he glanced over as the Eureka girl walked up. Is it what you expected? Naoto hummed and gazed around the room. Not in the slightest. I'm impressed, 1A. You can certainly put on a good show. She smirked and clapped him on the shoulder. We do our best. By the way, I heard you guys are putting on a play later. I think Izuku was interested in checking it out. Naoto raised an eyebrow at that. Really? Your class rep is interested in our play? Eureka grinned. Don't sound so surprised. I swear we're not terrible people once you get to know us. Naoto chuckled and accepted the plate handed to him by Satu. I'm starting to see that. He took a bite of his crepe, and his eyes widened. Oh, that's good. I must have the recipe. Itsuka frowned, glancing around the open room. Where's Monoma? I thought he was carrying props with Tetsu. The boy in question glanced over at her. I think he went to check out 1A's nightclub thingy. It's been a while, though. What do you think could have happened? One of the doors opened, and Itsuka glanced over to see Monoma walk in with a strawberry-filled crepe sitting on a simple paper plate. She raised an eyebrow. Where'd you get that? The blonde huffed. 1A may be a bunch of glory hogs, but at least they know how to make a good crepe. And I guess they can put on a decent show. Itsuka grinned. Good to hear. Chizome glanced down at his phone, reading the notification about UA's school festival. Pausing, he opened one of the links, which brought him to a live feed from 1A's performance. He could see Save Point and Ground Zero on the stage, but his focus was drawn to the blur that could occasionally be seen delivering refreshments to the various tables in the background. He smirked as Ignition allowed himself to be dragged into a conversation with one of the Gen Ed students. Good. He's learned to loosen up. Perhaps this new generation of heroes is worthy of the title. He pocketed his phone and turned his attention back to the city below. Now, what to do about you, Meta Liberation Army? As the last of the guests left, Izuku texted Kaminari to let him know that the event was over. As the lights began dimming, The class all started moving around the auditorium and picking up whatever trash Kauda's friends hadn't already taken care of. May walked in the door and immediately began dismantling the stage she'd helped set up, already gushing about all the attention her babies had gotten. Yoarashi quickly set about sorting the trash into piles of plastic, glass, paper, and compostable waste, which then funneled into trash bins that Itza had carted over from one of the many janitorial closets around campus. Izuku stood on the stage and scanned the room, nodding in satisfaction as everything that needed doing was already being handled. He dropped to the floor and made his way towards the double doors, grinning as Aizawa-sensei appeared, a smiling Eri on his hip. "Looks like you had fun, Eri. Did you like the music?" She nodded excitedly. "There were so many nice sounds. And everyone was so nice. I want to do it again." Aizawa-sensei chuckled and ran a gentle hand through her long white hair. "Sorry, kiddo. This was a special occasion. Though, I might be able to talk to Cementos and Power Loader about constructing a more permanent version of the setup for weekends. I know for a fact Mike would love being able to DJ for his students." Eri squealed with glee, and Izuku laughed. It's great that she can smile now. Suck it, Chisaki. 3 weeks later. Izuku flopped onto the couch, sighing with boredom. Ugh. I trained my heart out yesterday, nothing in my game library is hitting right, and I'd have to arrange a visit home ahead of time. I'm so bored. Katsuki grunted and leaned forward, snagging the TV remote off of the cabinet. Might as well channel surf, huh? Izuku hummed noncommittally, slumping against the cushions. Whatever. Just put on something interesting. Katsuki started flipping through the channels. Ugh. It's like everyone decided to be boring today. Even the cartoon channels are just showing old reruns. Call me crazy, but you can only watch Mighty Adventures so many times before it loses its appeal. Izuku huffed. Tell me about it. Katsuki changed the channel again, and Izuku shot up at the side of the stage on screen. Hang on, that's the hero rankings. They must be presenting the new top 10 today. Katsuki started turning the volume up as the rest of the class started filing into the common room. The woman emceeing the event announced, "Welcome, everyone, to our biannual hero rankings. Coming to you live from the freshly rebuilt Kamino Ward, we're about to present our newest rankings for the top 10. Starting off at number 10, we have the Flame Hero, Endeavor." The class groaned as the iconic flaming costume approached the microphone on the stage. Ashido whined, "Why the heck is he still working? Shouldn't the HPSC have given him some kind of punishment after the whole Todoroki thing?" Aizawa-sensei grunted from his position by the kitchen counter. Officially, he had his license revoked pending a background check and specialized test. However, around the time of the provisional license exam, the HPSC returned his license, stating that he was too efficient to keep off the field. Katsuki huffed. At least he's been knocked down to number 10. Small victories. As the hero walked off the stage, the MC announced, "At number 9, it's the equipped hero, Yorawi Musha." The wizened hero walked up to the mic to the cheers of the crowd. "Thank you all. My agency and I greatly appreciate your support over the years. Sadly, I cannot in good faith pretend that I will keep working for too much longer. The truth is undeniable, I am growing too old to continue working efficiently as a hero. Do not despair, however, there are plenty of other heroes to pick up the slack once I inevitably retire. The way of the warrior will persist so long as heroes continue to protect." He walked off the stage, followed by a round of applause. The announcer continued, "Moving on, at number 8, we have the laundry hero, Wash." As the hero approached the mic, Katsuki huffed, "How the heck does that guy make the top 10 in every ranking?" Izuku grunted. "High approval ratings, low property damage, and high rescue and capture statistics. Simple as that." The MC announced, "At number 7, we have the Arbor hero, Kamui Woods." Izuku leaned back and laid a hand on his head. Good grief. It's only been a year and a half since he and Mount Lady made their joint debut. It's crazy how much has happened in so little time. Katsuki nodded. Remember how she jumped in and stole his takedown on that giant villain? Geez, that was the first day of our third year of junior high. The announcer continued, "At number 6, it's the Dragoon heroine, Ryukyu." Katsuki and Okako cheered as their mentor walked up to the microphone. One reporter stood up and shouted, "Ryukyu. There have been rumors that you recently suffered major injuries on account of your hero work. Can you ascertain the validity of these rumors? Ryukyu huffed. If you are referring to my brief holiday 3 weeks ago, then no. Any injuries I suffered then were nothing major, simply a drain on my stamina. Rest assured, I have been in peak form for quite some time now. The heroine walked off as the audience cheered. The MC announced, moving on, at number 5, we have the shield hero, Crust. Aizawa-sensei grunted. Finally made it into the top 5, huh. Good for him. Izuku could relate. The man was a good hero through and through, always working his hardest in whatever area he found himself in. The announcer continued, at number 4, it's the ninja hero, Edgeshot. The man walked up to the microphone, stoic as usual. A reporter shouted, Edgeshot. Are you aware that you came in third in terms of approval ratings? The hero huffed. The numbers mean little to me. I am simply here to do my job to the best of my ability. If I am ranked at number 4, so be it. As Edgeshot left the stage, the MC announced, at number 3, we have the fiber hero, Best Jeanist. The man didn't appear, and the crowd began muttering. The MC shuffled through her notes and continued, due to injuries he suffered during the Kamino incident, Best Jeanist was unable to make an appearance today. Rest assured, he is recovering well and will be back in the field before too long. Moving on, claiming the number 2 spot is the wing hero, Hawks. The man swooped down from the ceiling, landing by the mic. Thank you all. I'm gonna be honest, I wasn't expecting to ever make it past number 3. Nor did I ever really care about moving up the ranks. Still, it's a great honor to receive such an exalted position. Though, I don't think anybody saw this last part coming. Katsuki frowned. They better not have knocked the bunny below the top 10, not after all she did at Kamino. Izuku grinned. Well, considering the only other hero to defeat All for One was All Might himself, what do you think they did? Katsuki's eyes widened as he connected the dots. The announcer continued, last, but certainly not least, our newest holder of the number 1 spot, the rabbit hero, Mirako. Loud cackling could be heard through the screen as Mirako appeared on stage. The crowd cheered as she approached the mic, and she drank in the attention. Thank you, you're all great. Never cared much for the rankings myself, but I can't deny that being ranked number 1 is awesome. I've got some big shoes to fill, but that's not gonna keep me from doing my job. All you villains out there, watch yourselves. There's a brand new number 1 in town, and she is coming for your asses. The crowd cheered, only to fall silent as the realization hit. The MC coughed and announced, now, I'm certain a good number of you are wondering something important, where is All Might? Booming laughter could be heard, and Izuku leaned forward in excitement. The curtains behind the stage drew apart, and All Might walked up to the microphone, clad in his Silver Age costume. Wonder no more, I am here. The crowd cheered, only to fall silent again. One brave reporter stood up and asked, wait, All Might, if you're no longer in the top 10, then why are you here? The hero's smile dropped, and he sighed. Because, in truth, I cannot be here any longer. There was a burst of smoke, and the class gasped as the emaciated form of the third-year business teacher became visible at the mic, wearing All Might's costume. Aizawa-sensei grunted. Guess he's decided to throw in the towel for good. All Might announced, please, hold your questions. I promise I will explain everything. The crowd fell silent, and he continued, for the past 6 years, this has been my true appearance. Whenever I worked as All Might, I would hide my weakness under a facade of strength. And though I tried to hide it, ever since I fought the scourge of Kamino 6 years ago, my power has been fading. My retirement was approaching quickly, whether I liked it or not. I took up a teaching position at UA to try and find someone who could succeed me, someone who would uphold my role as symbol of peace. At the time, I could only hold my heroic form for a maximum of 3 hours a day. However, when the first semester came to a close, I did not have the fortitude to use my strength for even a full minute. The symbol of peace can fight no longer. The crowd started muttering, and one reporter shouted, but who will protect the peace now? All Might chuckled. Have you not been paying attention? Even if I fall, there are many who will rise and pick up the slack. Your wonderful new top 10. All those lower in the rankings. Everyone working in the underground. And of course, the next generation of heroes, still enrolled at UA. Yes, there will never be another symbol of peace. I have come to realize that we cannot have a singular pillar holding up all of society. Instead, the duty falls to the next generation to uphold the peace together. My time in the sun has long since passed. I must now allow the younger heroes to step forward and take charge themselves. He undid the clasps on his cape and held it up in a clenched fist. Do not fear. Why? For they are here. Chapter 43. Rukiya Yotsubashi smiled as he read through the article that Skeptic had presented to him. So, All Might has stepped down from heroics, has he? That is good for us. All Might was the only hero that could have possibly stood in our way. Now, nothing will stop us from bringing Redistro's ideals to fruition. Skeptic frowned. It probably would have been faster if the damn rat hadn't shut down 3 of our major indoctrination facilities. How did he even catch wind of Alderot? Rukiya hummed. If memory serves, it was not actually Nezu who blew the whistle, but rather an esteemed Quirk counselor who attempted to check up on a patient of hers that attended the school. A shame, too. I'd heard about a particularly promising student with a fantastic meta ability who would have done wonders to spread our ideals. Getten grunted from his position in the corner of the office. Whatever. The damage has already been done, and there is little we can do about it now. We must focus our efforts on what we can do, once we make our grand play. Curious, how is progress on the media front? The blue-skinned reporter grinned. Support for Distro's ideals is soaring. Now that villain activity is rising and major heroes are retiring, people are growing frustrated that they can't use their meta abilities to defend themselves. We've had a large influx of soldiers. Rukiya nodded. Good. Trumpet, what can you report on our political statistics? The man slicked his hair back. The Hearts and Minds Party has been advocating for more regulation of heroes. Ever since the Endeavor scandal, people have been eating it up. Our numbers grow ever stronger, though we may lose some when our true motives come to light. Fortunately, that is a small percentage in comparison to our current standing force. Skeptic interjected, if I may refresh your memory, sir, our forces are currently 400,000 soldiers strong, not counting however many fresh members we'll receive in the coming weeks. In addition, 1,500 of those are heroes of varying ranks, though none are too far into the public eye to warrant much interest. Rukiya nodded. And how goes production of our manifesto? Curious pulled out her phone, tapping the screen a few times. Our offshore publishing company has been putting out thousands of copies daily, which have been distributed to stores across the country. We've made sure to eradicate any possible connection to Ditnerat. Rukiya smirked. Good. Soon, the Meta Liberation Army will rise once again. He raised his hand to his forehead, thumb, and forefinger forming an L shape. For the liberation of meta abilities. Aizawa-sensei walked into the classroom as the bell rang to signal the start of classes. Morning, Hellspawn. While All Might may be retired from hero work, he will still be serving an advising role in your hero classes. In keeping with that, you should be aware that his name is Yagi Toshinori. Also, as you've probably noticed by now, there's been a distinct lack of interaction between the 2 first-year hero classes. As such, Foundational Heroics this Friday will be a special joint training exercise between 1A and 1B. Be sure to keep up your training between now and then. Izuku raised his hand. Sir? How will Momo's absence affect the exercise? Aizawa-sensei frowned. Vlad King and I haven't discussed that yet. Though, that does remind me. Midoriya, I'd like to talk to you after classes today in the teacher's lounge. As the hero walked out of the door, Izuku rubbed his chin in thought. What could that mean? What does it have to do with Momo? Later that day, once classes had ended, Izuku walked up to the teacher's lounge and knocked on the door nervously. Aizawa-sensei. You wanted to talk to me. The door slid open, and Izuku walked inside, a bead of sweat rolling down his neck. Aizawa-sensei glanced up from his computer and grunted as he saw the student walk in. The hero stood up and walked over to a pair of beanbag chairs in the corner, sitting down in one of them and directing Izuku to sit in the other. Right. I'll be blunt, we think we might have a way to help Yayorozu. Izuku's eyes widened. Really? I thought we'd hit a dead end. Healing quirks can only help so much, and any healing items I create only work on myself, trust me, Katsuki and I experimented with that. Aizawa-sensei winced. Well, that's where the think part comes in, it involves Eri. Izuku frowned. That does complicate things. What's the idea? Aizawa-sensei laced his fingers together. According to Mimoto's analysis, Eri's quirk stockpiles a unique form of energy in her horn, which she then uses to rewind biological organisms. Her horn can only hold so much, and the energy stockpiles over time, so she can only go so long without using her quirk. When it first manifested, she accidentally rewound her father out of existence, and her mother gave her up to the Shihasaikai's former head, Eri's biological grandfather. Izuku hummed. You thought that, if she had enough quirk control, you could get her to rewind Momoto before she was attacked by Todoroki. Aizawa-sensei nodded. Precisely. For the past couple of weeks, I've been trying to help her gain a handle on her quirk, but we've been practicing on things like fruits and vegetables. She's still not comfortable using her quirk on another person. I think she's still afraid that she'll lose control and rewind too far. Izuku frowned and rubbed at his chin. Why are you telling me? Aizawa-sensei sighed and laid a hand on his shoulder. Because Eri trusts you more than anyone else. If you were there to encourage her, I think she might be able to pull it off. Izuku blinked. You're sure? Aizawa-sensei chuckled. She always latches onto your leg whenever the two of you are in the same room. I think it's a safe bet. Izuku hummed. Maybe so, but this is still uncharted territory. Wouldn't it be safer to try it on someone or something else first, just to make sure it works? Aizawa-sensei frowned. We've considered that possibility, but we haven't come up with any ideas for test dummies, so to speak. We definitely can't ask a student or faculty member. Yagi tried to volunteer himself, but Netsu vetoed that instantly. Izuku rubbed at his chin. I can't think of anyone. There was a cough, and the two of them turned to see Shimura standing nearby. I've got an idea. Eri clutched at Izuku's shirt nervously as he carried her into the room containing Kurogiri's unconscious form. Who is that? Why are we here? Izuku set her down on the floor and knelt to look her in the eyes. There's a girl in the nurse's office who's fast asleep because of something that happened a while ago, and we think you might be able to wake her up with your quirk. But we don't want to try it on her first without knowing it'll work. This boy is also really fast asleep because of something that happened to him a long time ago, 15 years, give or take. Do you think you can try to rewind him only a little bit, to before he fell asleep? Eri frowned and glanced at Kurogiri. I don't know. I've turned apples into flowers, but I've never tried turning it off after rewinding for lots of years. Do you think I can do it? Izuku smiled reassuringly. Of course you can. Because I know you, Eri. You wouldn't let yourself hurt anyone. You've been working so hard, I know you can do it. And even if you can't, then Aizawa-sensei will be there to help you turn it off. You just need to take it slowly enough that he can stop it before it goes too far, alright? She nodded fearfully. Alright. Just, do it slowly. I can do that. Izuku smiled softly and patted her on the shoulder. I know you can. He stood up and took her by the hand, walking up to the former villain's unconscious body. He glanced back and nodded at Tsukachi through the window, who flipped a switch on the control board. The quirk-canceling cuffs on Kurogiri's wrists activated, and the mist faded to reveal the teenage body underneath. Eri shuddered at the teen's blank eyes, and Izuku squeezed her hand in reassurance. She took a deep breath and let go of Izuku's hand, stepping forward and placing a hand on Kurogiri's leg. Her horn glowed, and streams of yellow light flowed along her body, spreading across her arm, down her hand, and onto Kurogiri's body. Slowly, carefully, the teen's body began to shift. Old scars reopened and healed, color began returning to his skin, and his hair began to shift from deep purple to sky blue. As the teen's eyes shifted from pale yellow to faded blue, Izuku called, "That's enough, Eri." She immediately lifted her hand from the teen's leg and stepped back, placing a hand on her head. With a pained expression, she groaned softly, and the yellow light faded. Her horn was only slightly smaller than before, but it was a definite sign of usage. Once the yellow light had fully disappeared, Izuku stepped forward and swept Eri into his arms. The girl immediately nestled her head in his chest, her breath hitching. Did I do it?" Izuku glanced up as the teen blinked a couple times, before glancing around the room. His gaze landed on Aizawa-sensei through the glass, and his eyes widened. "Sha? Is that you? What the heck happened? You got old." Izuku snorted and ran a hand through Eri's hair. "You did it, kiddo." Izuwa-sensei opened the door, tears welling in his eyes. Oboro. The teenager, apparently named Oboro, glanced between the hero and the student. "Can someone explain to me what the heck is going on? I don't really like not being in the know." Izuwa-sensei silently stepped forward and wrapped his arms around the teen, pulling him into a tight hug. "I thought I'd lost you. We thought you'd died." Oboro's eyes widened, and he ran a hand over his chest. Before you catch me up to speed, can I get changed? The school uniform is still the same, right?" Izuwa-sensei chuckled and pulled back from the teen. "You've just been resurrected, and that's what you're worried about." Oboro grinned. "Of course it is, Sha. It hasn't been that long, has it?" Tsukachi coughed from his position on the other side of the glass. "I'll let Yamada and Kayama know that you're bringing an old friend to the teacher's lounge. Midoriya, please go with them. You deserve to know the full story, given your involvement." Oboro leaned forward, clutching his head in his hands. "You're telling me that, for over a decade, I was an emotionless fog bank under the employ of the greatest supervillain in history?" Shimura huffed from where he was standing by the door to the teacher's lounge. "Well, I'm not surprised. All for One always had a thing for manipulating people to get what he wanted, whether directly or indirectly. A mind control quirk isn't exactly outside his MO." Oboro blinked a couple times, before leaning back in his chair and letting out a deep sigh. "Well, at least I'm back now, right?" Izuwa-sensei nodded. "Yeah. So, what all do you remember?" Oboro hummed. "Well, you're Izuwa Shouta, hero name Eraserhead." He pointed at present Mike. "That's old yada yada," his finger moved towards midnight. "There's Nemuri," he pointed at Nedzu. "And that's Nedzu, our homeroom teacher." The mammal beamed. "Why, I'm so glad you remember me, Shirakumo-kun. It warms my heart to know that I'm so memorable." Shirakumo frowned. "Let's see. I was a second-year hero course student at UA. Shouta, Nemuri, and I were doing a work study under His Purple Highness while Hisashi was with the Buster Union. I remember that Shouta and I were playing with a bunch of little kids when a villain attacked. He could store and release attacks. I remember hearing one of Hisashi's screams, and then I saw a building about to fall on Shouta. I shoved him out of the way, then, nothing. After that, I remember waking up in a cell without any windows. There was this doctor guy and a guy with holes in his hands. There were a lot of sessions where the doctor would do something to me, I'm not sure what it was. Then, in one of those sessions, I blacked out. Next thing I know, I'm waking up in a different cell with a little girl touching my leg." Izuwa-sensei hummed. "We'd assumed that you died under that rubble. The paramedics had told me that you were dead." Shimura huffed. "They must have been working for All for One. I wouldn't put it past him." Shirakumo frowned. "I remember, at one point, the guy with holes in his hands said something about not getting the right quirk. I think I heard Shouta's hero name being mentioned at some point." Nedzu frowned. "So, we can assume that Garvey's attack all those years ago was orchestrated by All for One in an attempt to acquire Shouta-kun's quirk, but instead got Shirakumo-kun, who he and the doctor eventually turned into Kurogiri." Shirakumo blinked. "Kurogiri? That sounds familiar." He stared down at his hand, and his eyebrows pinched. A yellow cloud emerged from his palm, floating into the air. Shirakumo's eyebrows furrowed deeper, and the cloud turned black with a purple outline. Another black cloud emerged from his other hand, and the two floated in the air a good distance apart. Shirakumo stuck a hand into one of the clouds, and it came out of the other cloud. Izuwa-sensei's eyes widened. "You can still use Warp Gate? I thought that the rewinding would have undone any of the alterations made to your body to accommodate multiple quirks." Shirakumo pulled his hand back and hummed, staring at it. "It's like Warp Gate got dragged into my original quirk as a side aspect. I've still got my old clouds, but I can use the new ones if I concentrate hard enough. I'm probably out of practice, though." He glanced over at Nedzu. "Any chance I could rejoin 2A?" Nedzu frowned. "As things stand, I'm not sure I'm comfortable with you immediately joining a second-year class. However, I'm certain you'd fit right in with the current 1A, especially considering that Shouta is their teacher. Shirakumo's head snapped around to stare at Aizawa-sensei with a wide grin. I told you you'd make a great teacher. Aizawa-sensei huffed. Debatable. Izuku grinned. No, it's definitely not debatable. We wouldn't trade you for the world, sensei. Nezu coughed into his paw. On the subject of 1A, I believe that Shirakumo-kun was a trial run for young Yaoyorozu. Izuku nodded and glanced down at where Eri was sitting in his lap. Do you think you can do it again? We don't need you to go as far back this time, so it should be a little easier. She stared up at him and nodded. If it means I can help someone else with my sea quirk, then I'd like to try. Recovery Girl glanced over as Izuku, Eri, and Aizawa-sensei filed into Momo's room. She was thankfully not holding her trademark syringe cane, already aware of Eri's trauma. Did the trial run succeed? Aizawa-sensei nodded. Oboro is back and perfectly healthy. He still has his memories, even though his body was rewound to before the Garvey attack, so we have a little room for error. Eri frowned, her expression determined. I'm going to get it closer this time. How far back do I need to go? Izuku led her over to Momo's bed, picking the little girl up and setting her on a chair next to the teen sleeping form. A little over 4 months. Can you do that? Eri hummed in affirmation and gently laid her hand on Momo's leg. Her horn glowed, and the soft yellow light spread down her arm onto the older girl's body. Izuku watched the process like a hawk, not even taking his eyes off his vice rep for a second. Recovery Girl called out, her vitals are improving steadily. From the readings, she's rewinding about a week every second. Izuku nodded wordlessly, staring at Momo's face. Several agonizing seconds passed, and the steady beep of the heart monitor grew louder. Her abdomen twitched, and Izuku watched as the hole slowly began to close. He leaned forward, his breath hitching. The second her stomach was fully healed, Izuku clapped his hands once, and Eri obediently removed her hand, her quirk cutting off immediately. For several heart-wrenching seconds, nothing changed. A bead of sweat rolled down Izuku's neck as Momo laid still. Did it not work? Did we not go far enough? Suddenly, her hand twitched. The heart monitor's beeping grew louder and more frequent. Izuku's heart leapt into his throat as, after 4 painful months, Momo finally opened her eyes. Izuku. He launched himself forward, wrapping her in a tight hug. Tears flowed freely from his eyes as he pulled her close. We did it. We actually did it. You're back. Chapter 44. As Class 1A filed onto the viewing platform in Ground Gamma, they saw Vlad King and Aizawa-sensei standing next to Yagi-san and Midnight. However, their attention was soon drawn to 1B gathered together on the platform, and the knowledge hit that they'd never seen 1B's hero costumes before now. Izuku hummed disapprovingly as he scanned the various outfits on display. Do you think Power Loader would give Mei overtime pay if we threw her at 1B? Katsuki grunted. Pretty sure he'd prefer if we didn't give the gremlin more opportunities to spread her signature brand of chaos. At least a majority of the costumes were decent. Away's outfit gave him a decent measure of defense, and he definitely accounted for his quirk by adding several pouches of different materials. Kybura's costume looked baggy at first glance, but a closer look revealed metallic sleeves on his limbs and a sturdy jumpsuit underneath. Kodai's outfit at least had bracers on the forearms and a pouch to hold small objects for her quirk. Izuku knew from conversation that Shouta's costume was built tough, much like the short student himself. Tsunatri's outfit wasn't well suited for close-quarters combat, but given her quirk, it made sense to build her costume around a ranged fighting style, and even then, it had some measure of defense. Suburuba's outfit sported knee pads at the very least. Tetsu wore boots with metal soles, which would make decent weapons in the event his quirk failed. Tokichi's quirk basically demanded that her outfit be easy to split up, but still look defensive enough in a pinch. Fukidashi's costume looked sturdy enough at first glance, but Izuku prayed for his sake that it wasn't the same material as Aoyama's old plate armor. 2 of 1B's costumes were actually very good. Honmuki sported armored plating across his entire body, and Izuku could spot the ends of an extending rebreather in the other boy's helmet. Quite useful, considering Honmuki's quirk allowed him to soften any solid surface to the same consistency as water. He'd made the mistake of trying to figure out how that works scientifically. After a long all-nighter, he chalked it up to quirks are bullshit and left it alone. Meanwhile, Rin sported scale-like bracers on his wrists and practical boots on his feet, which would prove useful in the event he couldn't use his quirk. Izuku had also heard that said bracers were a support item that let the other boy shoot his scales off like Crust's shields. Unfortunately, the remaining 9 costumes desperately needed a serious upgrade, or several. Kamakiri was wearing a torn shirt, which in and of itself was a serious hazard, given that it could easily be grabbed by an opponent. Kuroiro's outfit lacked serious defensive measures, even taking his quirk into account. Izuku knew Kendo was looking into possible changes, but that didn't excuse the severe lack of skin coverage. It wasn't as bad as Momo's first costume, but still. Komura's costume made sense thematically, but it just wasn't all that practical, so many loose ends, so many things for an opponent to get a hold of. Shishida's lack of a shirt made some sense, but even Kiri's Hima knew by now not to rely solely on his body's natural defenses. Bando's costume looked fine at first glance, but as he moved around, it became clear that it was just too flexible to offer any level of protection. Monoma's tuxedo just screamed impracticality, especially with those loose coattails. It could be argued that Yanagi's lack of defenses was for the same reasons as Tsunatri or Kode, but both other girls sported some measure of defensive gear, while the telekinetic had basically nothing. And then, of course, was the absolute worst offender. Before anyone could even react, Izuku walked up to Shiozaki, laid a hand on her shoulder, looked her in the eyes, and said, "You are going to the support department after classes today. You are in dire need of a proper costume. Do not try to argue. Kendo, Shouta, back me up." 1B's Vice Rep sighed. "Trust me, we've tried, Midoriya-kun. Sadly, she insists on this design and material. She's religious to a fault, and there's not much we can do to convince her." Izuku sighed and released his grip on the girl's shoulder. "Hopefully, we can turn that around here." He crossed his arms and walked up to the teachers. "So, what's the exercise?" Aizawa-sensei nodded at his bluntness and turned, raising his voice to address all 39 students assembled on the viewing platform. "Right 1A, 1B, now that you're all here, we can begin our joint training exercise. The idea is to compare the skills and abilities of the two classes, so that Vlad and I can figure out what you need to improve on. You'll be split into teams of 4 and compete against each other, 1A versus 1B. Monoma stuck his hand in the air. "Sir, I can't help but notice that 1A has only 19 students here today. How are you going to solve this imbalance?" Aizawa-sensei crossed his arms and smirked. "You need to learn how to count better." Someone cleared their throat, and Class 1A whirled on the spot, several excited squeals being made as Momo stepped out of the shadows of the viewing platform. Okako launched herself through the air and tackled the taller girl to the ground, which prompted a massive dogpile by the rest of the class. Izuku snorted as he hung back by the teachers, letting his classmates have their reunion. "You're devious, you know that." Aizawa-sensei grinned wider. "Just a logical ruse, problem child." Izuku chuckled to himself, before bringing his fingers to his mouth and letting out a piercing whistle. 1A, back in order. The class slowly peeled themselves away from Momo, who dusted herself off and walked over to stand next to the teachers. Aizawa-sensei nodded and continued, "Now, I will admit, considering Yaoyorozu's condition, she's likely not on the same level of training as the rest of you. As such, the group with her will be a team of 5. The 5th member will be someone you're both familiar and unfamiliar with." Light cackling could be heard, and Izuku grinned as Shirakumo dropped out of the sky to land next to Momo. He was clad in an aviator jacket, blue GI and blue aviator cap, and was holding a red quarterstaff in his hand. A patch over his heart proudly displayed his chosen hero name, Loud Cloud. "Hey there, kiddos. Shirakumo Aburo is my name, and heroics is my game. Nice to meet ya." Katsuki frowned. "How are we supposed to be familiar with this joker?" Shirakumo's cheerful grin dropped a bit. "Okay, don't freak out, but..." Black clouds flowed from his hands, and Ashido balked. "Kurojiri." 1A went through a variety of reactions, and Izuku sighed. You'd think they'd be more receptive after being exposed to Shimura. He clapped his hands together, drawing 1A's attention. "Right, listen up. Shirakumo was one of Aizawa-sensei's classmates at UA, but suffered an unfortunate accident during his 2nd year and was turned into Kurojiri by the League of Villains. However, we managed to bring him back as a trial run for the method we used to revive Momo. The details are classified, but know that both are as healthy as they were before their respective, let's say, incidents. Because Nezu was hesitant to let Shirakumo back into a second-year course immediately, he'll be getting back in shape alongside our class. Capic. 1A voiced their understanding, followed by 1B a moment later. Aizawa-sensei nodded. Right. Teams have been sorted ahead of time, and are as follows. Class 1A. Team 1, Ajiro Mashirao, Tokoyami Fumikage, Midoriya Izuku, Yaoyorozu Momo, Shirakumo Aburo. Team 2, Aitsa Tinya, Kirishima Ajiru, Siro Hanta, Bakugo Katsuki. Team 3, Aoyama Yuga, Yurika Okako, Hagakure Toru, Ayama Hitachi. Team 4, Kaminari Denki, Satori Kido, Shaoji Mezu, Yoarashi Ineza. Team 5, Ashido Mina, Azui Tsuyu, Kauda Kauji, Jiro Kuka. Class 1B. Team 1, Kurohiro Shiai, Tsuburaba Kusei, Tokage Setsuna, Minoma Niato. Team 2, Awaze Yozutsu, Kaibara-sen, Kaino Kokomori, Shouden Ironjiki. Team 3, Kendo Itsuka, Shiozaki Ibara, Honmuki Jizu, Rin Hiryu. Team 4, Kamakiri Togaru, Shizhida Juruda, Bondo Kojiru, Yanagi Raiko. Team 5, Kodayui, Tsunatri Pony, Tetsu, Fukidashi Manga. Without being told, Class 1A immediately assembled into their assigned teams and spread out across half of the viewing platform, arranged so that everyone had a view of the giant screen displaying multiple camera feeds from around the training ground. After a few seconds, 1B awkwardly followed suit, shuffling around until they were sitting in their assigned teams. Vlad King grumbled for a bit, before straightening and stepping forward. Right. The objective is simple: place every member of the opposing team into your assigned jail within 20 minutes. If time runs out before then, the team with the most members remaining will be declared the victor. Aizawa-sensei jumped in, putting aside any class rivalries. This is still a school exercise. As such, your grade will be determined based on factors such as strategy, collateral damage, cooperation, and overall success. Losing is not an automatic failing grade, nor is winning an automatic passing grade. He looked out over 1A. I expect you to tackle this with the same effort that you've given everything else so far, Hellspawn. They collectively voiced their understanding, and he nodded. Good. First teams, the bots will lead you to your assigned starting positions. You'll have 5 minutes of prep time before the match begins. Get to it? Izuku fiddled with his gear as he glanced over the provided jail cell. Well, it's definitely Nezu's brand of off the wall. Still, the design of the cell isn't the focus of the exercise. He turned to face his team. Right. Logic states that we should know each other's capabilities before we put together a strategy. Quirk descriptions, lightning round. I can use items from video games that I played. Fumikage. The bird-headed boy snapped to attention. My quirk is a sentient creature of shadow. They grow stronger in darkness and weaker in light, but their strength is inversely proportional to their control. We are able to combine our physical strength, and can briefly conjure a shadowy avatar that can be up to 10 feet tall. Ajiro. I've got a prehensile tail. It's strong enough that I can use it to propel myself through the air at relatively high speeds, and it packs a decent punch, but that's about it. Yaoyorozu. The girl stood upright. I can make things from the lipids in my cells, though I have to know the chemical structures in order to create it. In addition, what I can make is limited by the fuel I have on hand, which correlates to how much I've eaten recently. Shirakumo-kun. The blue-haired boy grinned. I can make clouds. They're not physically identical to real clouds, more like giant balls of really solid cotton candy. Last I checked, they're sturdy enough to hold up to 2 tons of weight, and can move at around 35 km per hour when holding up to 1 ton. I can technically use warp gate, but I'm not experienced enough with it to consider it a viable option for this. Izuku nodded and brought a hand up to his chin. Gotcha. If memory serves, then Kurohiro can merge with black things, Tsuburaba makes walls of solid air, Tokage can split herself into multiple pieces, and Minoma can copy quirks through skin contact. The 3 watches on his belt lead me to believe that he can copy up to 3 quirks at a time, which means we're basically facing the first 3 twice over. Shirakumo frowned. So, effectively a 5-on-6? Not great odds. Izuku grinned. You only say that because you haven't seen what we're capable of. But I digress. We need a strategy. Fumikage hummed. It would stand to reason that Kurohiro would likely be able to merge with Dark Shadow. If he is able to manipulate objects that he fuses with, then that could prove problematic. I will attempt to stay away from shadows and other dark objects, and will prioritize someone else. Izuku nodded. Tokage doesn't have any black in her costume, so she's safe, but be careful with Tsuburaba. Avoid Monoma especially, since he could have Kurohiro hiding in his tuxedo. Or he could use Kurohiro's quirk himself. Fumikage nodded. Understood. Tsuburaba's air walls are not unbreakable, and Dark Shadow's strength is enough that they can probably break through. I will prioritize him in battle once Kurohiro has been exposed and separated from the others. Momo stuck her hand up. Given the variety of defenses I can create, and the fact that I can control their coloration, I believe I am best suited for handling Kurohiro. I remember Kendo-san telling me that Tokage-san can make her pieces levitate, so Shirakumo-kun would be best suited to handle her. The teen in question grinned. An airborne battle, suits me just fine. I've molded my fighting style around being able to move quickly, so I'll hopefully be able to fly rings around her. Izuku nodded. That leaves me and Ajiro to handle Monoma. I've faced him before and won, so he shouldn't be too much of a problem. You all have some sort of communicator, right? His classmates nodded, while Shirakumo shook his head with a frown. I see. Momo, make an earpiece for Shirakumo. We need to be able to contact each other if we run into a problem. Remember, divide and conquer. We need to get the enemy team separated in order to take advantage of their individual weaknesses. At the beginning, they'll likely all be together, so we need to split them up. I can probably handle that, so the rest of you, focus on your individual targets. Dark Shadow appeared from under Fumicage's cloak and smacked their fists together. Let's drop on these shitheads like a fucking piano. Fumicage barked, who the fuck taught you that language? They shared a laugh, before schooling their expressions. Vlad King's voice rang out, your prep time is up. Match 1, begin. Immediately, Izuku summoned his extreme gear under his feet and took off, bobbing and weaving around the giant pipes. Shirakumo was right next to him, riding on a cloud with Ajiro on his back. Fumicage was swinging from pipe to pipe using Dark Shadow's massive claws. Momo had used a coil of rope to lasso Izuku's leg, and was letting herself be pulled along atop a pair of roller blades. They made excellent time across the training ground, soon coming upon where the opposing 1B team was gathered by their own jail. Izuku slid to a stop behind a cluster of pipes, peering through an opening to survey the area. He could see Shirakumo and Ajiro floating in the sky, just barely high enough to make out. Fumicage silently dropped down next to Izuku, and Momo slid up next to the two of them. Monoma announced, let us show these One-Ruffians that their numbers do not matter. We shall rise up and prove our superiority. Kurohiro chuckled drily and merged with Monoma's tuxedo, his presence marked by a white Cheshire grin on one of the coattails. Tokage's eyes split off from the rest of her head and flew into the air, clearly aiming to get a good view of the area. Tsuburaba tapped his foot impatiently. Well, what's the scoop? Tokage frowned. That's weird. I can't find them anywhere. They're already hiding somewhere, and my bird's eye view isn't helping. Tsuburaba groaned. So we've gotta find them on foot? Ugh. I wish we had a hearing quirk on our team, like Jiro or Shaoji. Why does 1A get all the cool quirks? Monoma chuckled, but Izuku grinned at the hint of anxiety in the blonde's voice. Relax, Air Wall. We shall prevail. It will just take us longer than we initially predicted. Suddenly, Tokage cried out in pain, and her eyes fell to the ground, sporting small lumps on the lids. Something just hit my eyes. I can't see. Izuku grinned. That's our cue. He tossed a thumbs up in Momo's direction, and the girl nodded, creating a pair of springs and jumping on top. She launched herself out of hiding and immediately slammed her metal staff into Monoma. As expected, the sudden shock launched Kurohiro out of hiding, and Momo capitalized on it, grabbing the black-skinned boy and tying him up with a bone-white coil of rope. She created another pair of roller blades and took off, just as the others were starting to recover. Monoma shook his head and pointed in the direction of Momo's rapidly retreating form. Lizardy. After her. Shirakumo's voice echoed, I'm sorry. But I cannot allow you to do that. Suddenly, a swarm of clouds flew down from above and wrapped around Tokage, picking her up and hauling her into the sky. Seconds later, Ajiro dropped down and slammed his tail into Monoma's chest, sending the blonde flying into a cluster of pipes. Tsuburaba turned towards Ajiro, and Fumikage struck, grabbing the other boy's head with Dark Shadow's talon and bodily slamming him into a pipe, knocking him out cold in an instant. Izuku leapt from his hiding spot and grabbed Monoma by the arm, his extreme gear forming under his feet. "I'll take this." In a blast of wind, he took off, dragging the 1B student behind him. In a matter of seconds, he'd already reached the jail cell, and he tossed Monoma inside, right on top of Tokage and Kurohiro. Barely 10 seconds later, Fumikage dropped down from above and threw Tsuburaba into the cell, and the cartoon Nezu above the door stuck his paw in the air in a thumbs up. All members of the Class B team have been captured. Class A is the winner of this match. Izuku dropped onto the viewing platform, grinning as the rest of his team followed suit. Vlad King sent them an annoyed look, before glaring at Aizawa-sensei. "I told you we shouldn't have formed the teams randomly. Your class rep and vice rep were on the same team, along with the extra student, and look what happened. My students didn't even get a chance to do anything." Aiza coughed into his fist and raised his hand. "Actually, sir, the one-A team did give their opponents time to form a strategy before they attacked. And Tokage-san did manage to scout the area from above. Though, I do agree that this matchup was unfair in that 1B had no idea of Shirakumo-kun's capabilities." Aizawa-sensei nodded. "Very true, Aiza." His gaze switched to Izuku's group. "Though, Vlad has a point. The other team didn't have much of an opportunity to fight back, and while that's good in the field, it's likely to tank their grade." Izuku shrugged. What's the old saying? Practice how you plan to fight? Yeah. Professionals have standards." Katsuki grinned and said, "Be polite." Kyuka interjected, "Be efficient." Shirakumo finished, "Have a plan to beat everyone you meet." Aizawa-sensei huffed. "Whatever. Also, someone needs to go retrieve 1B from the cell. I doubt they're going to be awake enough to walk back anytime soon." "Alright, that's where we'll leave off for the day. Thanks so much for listening along with me today. If you enjoyed, please like and comment down below. It really helps with the algorithms. I look forward to seeing you next time. Ciao for now, lovelies."